Well, digital ID is one of the most dangerous threats to our hard-won freedoms. I am genuinely concerned that this could allow Orwellian governments to take full control of your lives for good.
Benefits are clear. Digital ID will make our interactions with each other and with the state faster, cheaper, and more reliable.
Well, Tony Blair's ghost is back, haunting and hijacking a Prime Minister so feeble he's clutching at every desperate straw in sight. Well, digital ID is Keir Starmer's latest ploy to gaslight us into thinking he has the tough solutions to stop illegal migration. That is a baseless lie. Look at Germany, look at Sweden. Both have digital ID. Both are drowning in surges of illegal migration, far worse than when we have it here in the UK. And what else does this remind you of? Do you remember the COVID vaccine passports? Those smug little green screens that barred the unjabbed from everyday life, serving as a blatant Orwellian tool of coercion and division. They alienated those refusing a rushed medical experiment, the same medical experiment you were told was safe and so-called stopped the spread, which we now know was not entirely safe, nor was it nearly as effective as we were led to believe. Well, if you didn't take the government at face value, let alone dared challenge them, you faced life-changing decisions. Travel abroad or be grounded at home. Keep your job or face financial ruin. See your family or stay isolated alone. Those were some of the choices the government often told you you had to make. Comply or shut up. Broadcasters even floated the grotesque idea of holding people down to forcibly jab them, or even shipping British people off to camps, all in the name of public safety. That is the raw, unchecked power governments can wield when given the tools, and digital ID hands them the sharpest blade possible. It paves the way for far worse down the line, doesn't it? One authoritarian regime later, and you, your children, and their children could face being sent to camps based on ethnicity, political views, religion, or even health status, as we've already seen. But why stop there? Why not seamlessly link your social media profiles, algorithmically scoring your influence and loyalty to the government, and roll out a full-blown social credit system while we're at it? Or one rogue tweet mocking net zero policies or questioning the narrative, well, zap, that's your train ticket evaporating in an instant, your bank account freezing without warning, and suddenly, before you know it, you're cast out of society, branded as an undesirable and forced to scrape by on the streets with no recourse. This happens in China. It sounds like fantasy, but it isn't. And I shudder to even paint this picture for you. But imagine a tin pot tyrant pitched up in Downing Street with his globalist handlers pulling their little strings from afar, twisting the dial on this dystopian nightmare. You know, you might be a Brexiteer with the wrong opinions. Well, you're confined to a so-called re-education camp. Your movement's tracked and curtailed like a common criminal. Wrong race, creed or ballot slip in the future, or your phone might buzz with a scarlet alert. Access denied. Citizen report immediately for reconditioning as doors to shops, hospitals and homes slam shut around you. I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, but this could happen, and it does happen in places around the world. And in my view, Tony Blair and Keir Starmer's insidious vision guts the fundamental rights our ancestors bled and toiled for, rights enshrined in the timeless ink of the Magna Carta, protections against arbitrary power that have stood as beacons for centuries. And digital ID flips the sacred presumption of innocence into one of constant, computerized suspicion. Show your papers on demand. Let cold, heartless computers and faceless bureaucrats dictate your legitimacy over your God-given right to move freely in your own country, speak your mind, or even access basic services like healthcare or education. It's all eerily foretold in George Orwell's 1984, a work that shifted from mere fantasy to a chilling prophecy of our end times, a stark warning on how to recognise and dodge the trap of encroaching evil before it swallows our country whole. Oh, people on the left and some on the so-called right are jumping for joy over this policy. They've heard these dire arguments and warnings time and time again, but simply do not care. They're blinded by the promises of people like Tony Blair who tell you it'll be efficient and you will have more security. We must reject this deep authoritarian creep outright, immediately, with every single voice and vote at our disposal before the door to reversal slams shut in your face forever. Well, before I get the thoughts of my panel, I'm joined now by the Liberal Democrat Attorney General spokesperson, Ben Maguire MP. Ben, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I wanted to paint a picture there of a future that is possible when you control people through digital identification. We've seen it used for very nefarious means in China, and it only takes one authoritarian regime, one elected person to become a dictator for this to go the wrong way, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's really concerning to hear these reports coming out of Downing Street tonight that they're going to introduce this mandatory, it's really important to stress that point, mandatory digital ID scheme. Obviously, you know, I'm the MP for North Cornwall. That's a particularly rural area. Not everyone in that constituency has access to smartphones, to computers, digital resources. So if the government really does bring this in as a mandatory scheme, it's really concerning from that perspective as well, because it's looking potentially to lock out older people, disabled people, those who maybe can't afford a smartphone. So it's really, really concerning if this is going to be the future of our country. We're going to have these digital ID cards, which will have things potentially like our bank details, our healthcare data. It really, really is a concern.
Yeah, indeed. Would you, as Liberal Democrats, if you were, let's just assume you potentially might become into a coalition with Labour, would you stop these sorts of things, perhaps even if you were the government? Would you reverse them if they do come into effect before the next election?
Yeah, it's really difficult, obviously, to speculate on what we would do in government, but certainly this would be a really important point of contention for us. And certainly as the opposition, we're essentially the main opposition now. The Tories seem to have given up on holding the government to account. So it's down to us Liberal Democrats to do that. And this will certainly be something we will be holding the Labour government's feet to the fire on. And can I just add as well, the cost of this scheme at a time when we're constantly told by Rachel Reeves and the government that we don't have money for really vital public services like healthcare. Obviously, down in my neck of the woods, we really desperately need better transport infrastructure. And yet here we see the government ready to splash hundreds of millions of pounds potentially on a digital ID scheme. Is that really what people in this country want right now?
No, I think it's totally bonkers. Ben Maguire MP, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Liberal Democrat Attorney General spokesperson there as well. Well, let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Conservative peer Sean Bailey, senior reporter for Guido Fawkes, Ellie Wheatley, and former Labour advisor Matthew Larzer. Ellie, I'll start with you. I find these kind of policies absolutely terrifying. The most important thing I want to stress to the public was that they never got to vote on this. This was not in Labour's manifesto. There's no national conversation had. Keir Starmer's just announcing it.
I totally agree with you. This was not in their Labour manifesto. Yvette Cooper and Reynolds, they were both saying in July last year that we can rule this idea out. They've totally U-turned on that. And also, it's a honeypot for hacks, not just a slippery slope towards a social credit system, etc. There's no mandate for this. And I think, actually, that if, depending on what the government actually announces tomorrow, I think there will be a serious rebellion against this amongst Labour MPs as well, because think about the Red Wall MPs, the Labour ones. Their constituents do not want this government overreach. So I reckon Starmer will have a difficult time trying to get this through, and hopefully it will be blocked.
Matthew, I'll come to you because, look, this is not going to stop the boats. This is not going to stop illegal migration. We cannot gaslight the public. We take Germany, Sweden, anywhere else in Europe that's got digital ID for the Prime Minister to use this as a tool to say, we know this migration problem's bad, but digital ID will fix it is nonsense, isn't it?
Well, I don't think anybody's saying digital ID alone will fix it, but yes, absolutely. It's the lack of an ID card here is a major pull factor because we just look at the number of people who are working illegally. One of the reasons is...
What do the current rules do that the digital ID...
OK, let's just address a few points. You were saying that the people in the Red Wall don't want it. In fact, a whole group of Red Wall MPs called to have a digital ID.
Yeah. I just want to play a clip quickly. The cracks obviously starting to show in the Tory party on this issue. Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Andrew Griffiths, spoke to Chris Hope earlier.
Full statement from Kemi Badenoch is this. She calls it a desperate gimmick that will do nothing to stop the boats, and then says this: there are arguments for and against digital ID, but mandating its use will be a serious step that requires a proper national debate. Why doesn't your leader come out against ID cards, given that's the Tory position for as long as I can remember?
Well, it's my personal position as well to be against a compulsory ID
So you're against
card.
your leader?
Well, my personal position, we have not seen what the government is coming up with, right? You may have been briefed, there may be rumours. We haven't seen the government's plans. Kemi's quite right to keep the focus on the government. It's not sad to say what the Conservative Party would or would not do. We did not introduce cards and we cancelled the previous project.
Yeah, that's Andrew Griffiths there, the Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade. Sean, I'll come to you briefly. And Matthew, I'll go back to you on some of the questions we had. But Sean, I'll come to you on this because, yeah, I mean, it does seem... I mean, Kemi Badenoch's been a little bit sort of here, there, nowhere on this issue. This is really what traditional Tories should be voting against, isn't it?
I have to disagree with you there. She came out and said it was a desperate move and it will not do anything to stop immigration, and we clearly know that. The idea that we should be registered is wrong. They should register people who come into the country. That's where the register needs to be. The other reason this is a ridiculous idea, of course, is because we already have ID cards in the form of an NI card. And what you have to do is enforce the rules that we have, not bring in new ones. One of the real problems with Parliament, I sit in the Lords, we do a lot on legislation, and many times a peer will challenge a law just by saying it's already on the statute books. This is another one that'll be in the statute books. Now, or they'll get away with it by saying you'll have a pretty picture on the card, because that doesn't exist yet. But it's useless unless someone enforces the rules. They currently don't enforce the rules, so I don't see why they think this will happen.
But also, illegal workers thrive off cash in hand. That's how they get paid. So I don't understand how an ID card is going to crack down on any of that. It will surely just go underground.
But again, this is a rule made up by people who do two things. They don't realise people really abuse this and know how, and they've never struggled a day in their life. The whole point of being a legal worker is cash in hand. An ID card does not stop that transaction.
Well, Matthew, this is just Tony Blair, isn't it? He's got it in the Prime Minister's week. When they first came into government, Yvette Cooper said they weren't going to do this. This wasn't in the manifesto for the Labour Party. No one's voted on this. This is a big shift of power from the people to the government, and no one's had a single vote.
It's absolutely not. Almost every citizen already has an ID card from the government, because they already have either a driving licence, a passport, or both.
More?
Because you just talked about enforcement, and it's about ensuring that the systems are joined up together. It's about getting rid of layers of government bureaucracy. Government bureaucracy. It's about having the efficiencies in how the state is run that places like the Baltic states have, where Pat McFadden, the senior minister, was just a few weeks ago, looking at how it works. It's not about asking people in the street to produce the ID card under ordinary circumstances.
Matthew.
I also don't think that we can trust the government to implement this efficiently at all. I mean, it took about 3 years to make the government, the gov.uk app. And also, it will be extremely costly. And who's paying for that? People watching.
It will save money over time.
The important thing about this, mandatory. Mandatory. I choose to have a driving licence. I cannot have one. This will be mandatory. And all of our rules suffer from mission creep. So the idea that the police won't get access to the information for other things
100%.
is ridiculous. Soon we'll get into medical...
It's just utter naivety that the government does... the government has lots of information on you anyway. I mean, I'm sorry to let people into a secret, but it's not 1870. Well, it's quite hard.
Matthew,
I mean, it really isn't.
Come on one of Sean's points here, because it's mandatory, right? How do you tell that? I mean, Ben, the Liberal Democrat Shadow Attorney General there, was saying that he's got many elderly people in his constituency that don't have smartphones. My grandparents don't have smartphones. What's going to happen? They're going to have to pay, the taxpayer going to have to pay for their smartphones.
No. So I think what will happen is, between... I just looked up the figures, and the smartphone take-up for everybody under 75 is in the 90s. Frankly, for people under 50, it's 100%. So I think what will happen is there will be a form of plastic card available temporarily for the first few years for those, because that cohort will, of older people will sadly move on, as it were. So, I mean...
cynical. We love
No, it's not cynical. I'm just saying that elderly people don't need to... No, elderly people don't need to worry. No, seriously, they're not going to be forced to have a smartphone.
That's not the issue. The issue's not about how you implement it. It's why you implement it. It shouldn't be implemented.
To make government more efficient and make life easier for the public.
In this country, we are innocent until proven guilty.
And you still will be.
And if anybody thinks I'm a conspiracist, ask themselves what happened around the debanking.
It's a legal requirement to produce ID anyway, Sean, at the moment.
These things will be driven into somewhere else. It happens to a lot of our law.
So you don't want fraud cut. You don't want people to make sure that people... how many times on this channel have we complained that people who aren't entitled to the NHS are getting access to NHS services? This will stop it.
Well,
you can't complain on one hand and then...
angle on this. We've seen data leak after data leak coming, not just out of Labour, by the way, out of the Tory time as well. We saw that billions of pounds we had to cover up the Afghan scandal with. Do we trust the government with our data, Ellie?
Absolutely not. I don't. I mean, why should we? And look at, as you say, that many examples. And also think about bad state actors. We've seen a lot of cybersecurity hacks across airports recently, etc. So this is, as I said before, total honeypot.
I don't see that the people in every other European country who have an ID card are living in fear of a totalitarian state, even in the most anti-European stream.
You say that, but that's not the point. Just because it doesn't exist now doesn't mean it won't ever in the history of humanity. And what we're doing is enabling a potential, as I said, tin pot dictator.
No, because it's a conspiracy theory.
It's not. It is. It's a massive transfer.
I tell you why it's not a conspiracy theory. All of our legislation moves on. It tries to adapt and mould. And what all happens is, if you have ID cards, for one thing, for employment, it will then start to be another. You immediately said NHS, fine, we might agree with that. But what happens when you get to the point you don't agree?
It's to access government services, and it's to stop that whole hodgepodge of IDs and of different ways of accessing services and make it cheaper and more efficient for the public.
To crack down on illegal immigration, and I just do not think that
that'll be part of it. Not having ID cards is, every study has shown, is a pull for illegal migration. It's why people stop...
saying, you can't get into the UK without a passport, and yet we see thousands...
No, because it's not about getting into the UK, it's about being able to operate when you're here and access services.
Look, I think there's a massive resistance to this now. I mean, every single major political party is against this. So let's see what happens. And I think there's a petition going around at the moment. It's collecting about 1,000 signatures an hour. It's at 300,000 now anyway. So we'll find out, won't we, if the government can be even more unpopular than it already is.